see if I can get a little closer to the microphone here. I want to thank Jan Goldstein for inviting me to be on this panel and for thinking of me in the context of this discussion about the role of historians as public intellectuals. It's one that I've thought a lot about in the course of my own studies about American historical writing over a century, and also from my own experience in the last decade of having the opportunity to participate in a variety of media settings and to say a few words about history, try to be sensible in the process, which is an incredible challenge, I might add. I really just want to make three brief points today. And the first is to say what my colleagues have already underscored, that there is, of course, a long history to historians serving as public intellectuals, and that is particularly true in the United States. There's nothing new about this role, and it is not likely to go away. The founding, the very founding of the American Historical Association in 1884 reflected a desire on the part of its architects and founders to spread the influence of historical knowledge and to put historians in a position of being able to better address the concerns of the contemporary society in late 19th and early 20th century America. The zeitgeist that led to our association very much reflected the political imperatives and concerns of the progressive era historians, and they were very explicit, Herbert Baxter Adams especially, in making the case that historians had a unique contribution to make in casting greater light on the problems of the day. So this is an old story. And since that time, of course, generations of academic historians have done just that. They have participated in the public spheres. This public sphere. Today, in print, radio, television, through books and articles, film, now blogs, digital media, as consultants, as for their work in local communities, in the world of museums, in politics, as advisors to presidents, in school boards, in government agencies, and of course as teachers, perhaps first and foremost. In all of these settings, historians have long been in a position to influence the public and to share their research and their expertise in settings beyond the academy. I was thinking as I was sitting here about Arthur Schlesinger and President Kennedy's desire to have a historian in the White House to really follow the events of the administration and presciently, as it turned out, to be in a position to write the history of his administration, which Kennedy, of course, did not live to do himself, although he had hoped to do so. I've been through Schlesinger's papers at the Kennedy Library, and one thing that is remarkable is how little attention President Kennedy seemed to pay to Arthur Schlesinger's insights, but he seemed very glad to have him close at hand and available to make them. So the paradox, you know, is a long and a noble one. What can I say? So whether the contributions of historians have been for good or ill in their role as public intellectuals is a matter of some lively debate, and there's some very good work on this subject, which I won't summarize today. Ian Terrell's, I think, very wonderful book, Historians in Public, engages this, and of course Peter Novick's That Noble Dream immediately come to mind. These studies detail how long and rich and often difficult the role of historian as public intellectual has been in the United States. It hasn't been a smooth ride, and it's not always a heroic tale. I'm thinking here, of course, of historians around the time of the First World War who jettisoned their objectivity to propagandize for war, and that was true for wars hot and cold throughout the 20th century. So it's a vexed role very often. There's reason to expect that American historians will continue to be engaged in the public for as long as our discipline exists. And in fact, that engagement increasingly seems to be seen as a way of ensuring the survival of the entire enterprise of academic history. In other words, I think these boundaries are increasingly coming down in all areas of the profession. I think it makes it quite difficult for younger scholars, actually, in some respects, as academic publishing and trade publishing, for example, draw closer together as they have over the course of my career. I've certainly seen this. And it becomes, it's quite difficult to break in, I think, to this wider world in some ways. And if the expectation is that people do this to make themselves relevant or to make themselves a star of some kind, well, that makes all the more difficult the absolutely torturous rise through the ranks that many of us have experienced. The explosion in information technology has given scholars in most fields, history included, of course, much larger access, on the other hand, to the public. And historians today, I think, have pursued very innovative ways of disseminating their research and shaping public opinion. Blogs and radio shows and websites that are designed to convey historical knowledge and to demonstrate their relevance to contemporary public affairs and current politics proliferate. And like many others, scholars have capitalized on the democratizing elements of new media to widen history's domain, so to speak. So the forms are new, the role is not. At the same time, and this is the second point I want to make, it's also the case, and this really is the essential thing I have to contribute this morning, I think, that history as a discipline, in my view, is in some ways very poorly suited to the modalities in which public intellectuals are operating today. Historical research is painstaking and slow. The forms and demands of contemporary media are often haphazard and rushed. Historical knowledge and interpretation are nuanced and complex when they're good. Nuance and complexity are very hard to convey in a 2-minute soundbite, a tweet, a newspaper, a radio interview, or in a television spot. And where historians, and this I think I really want to underscore this point, where historians attend to structure and content as critical variables in the past, the public demand is for precedence. That's often what, if you're being interviewed by a newspaper reporter or doing one of these television things, they want to know a few things. They want to know, did what is happening today ever happen before? The answer is invariably yes. Everyone can have a career as a public intellectual if you can answer that question, and every historian can. The next question is when? And the next question is what was the outcome? And then the final question is then what can we learn from how prior crises were resolved? These questions are well worth asking and answering, and I don't mean to ridicule them. But the danger is that that inquiry makes of the past little more than hunting ground for a shard of glass that reflects who we are today. And that endeavor, in that endeavor, historical events, actors, and trends are stripped from the setting in which they are best understood. And in conforming to the need for brief, succinct, accessible, and relevant infusions of history, it's easy to compromise the very pastness of the past, flattening context and structure to meet the demands of our impatient and ahistorical age. Historians who participate in the public sphere, and most, I would argue, do so in one way or another, thus run the risk of simply echoing rather than challenging or problematizing the demands the present makes in its excursions, I should say, into the past. It's easy simply to feed the presentness of contemporary society rather than challenge it if you engage in that process. And so you have to be willing to say it's actually not the same. It's quite different. The third point I want to make is simply to say that these opportunities and dangers converge to create a great and what I believe is a worthy challenge for historians. And that's to remain true to our calling while ensuring history a secure place in our very present-minded times. Many living in the 21st century feel that they are standing on the edge of history, facing challenges unlike those that have been faced by previous generations. And on some level, of course, they're correct. But it's a conviction that has been shared by a great many previous generations, as all of us as historians know. Historians, I think, can provide an important bulwark against this tilt towards presentism as long as we don't indulge in it ourselves. And that's very easy to do if we simply twist the past to meet the appetites and imperatives of our own day. Historians, as intellectuals, as public intellectuals, thus have a very complicated task. And in thinking about it, I too am drawn to the great historian Mark Bloch. How can we not be? History requires us to join the study of the dead and of the living, he wrote in 1941. And he quoted with approval the comment of a colleague of his who said, "If I were an antiquarian, I would have eyes only for the old stuff. But I am a historian, therefore I love life." This faculty of understanding the living is, in very truth, Bloch wrote, the master quality of the historian. So in short, historians' value as public intellectual is derived from their singular ability to engage the living and the dead. That is a very important imperative. But it is also our task to add complexity to the understanding of the present by conveying the deep richness of the past, which is really where our expertise lies. So, thank you very much.